if you could you just explain to us kind of your role here at Third Stage and how you help our clients throughout their digital transformation?
Sure. My name's Dr. Scott Janke. I actually am a senior manager at Third Stage, really going about the business of helping organizations either assess their processes and how they use their incumbent tools, or to assist them in looking at new opportunities for changes in ERP or another technology that would enable them to meet their business goals.
Excellent. And today we're actually talking about a case study, so a specific work that you've done with one of our clients within our community today. So can you give us kind of an overview of the reason why this client reached out to Third Stage?
Yeah, it's a familiar story, quite honestly. The organization feels like they were disconnected with their international offices. Silos of information were present. The incumbent technology really wasn't being used across the organization. And people were complaining about all the challenge they had with getting documents and information from another department, and really led us to kicking off the project with them to look at their technology and potentially advising them to maybe move into a new ERP implementation.
Excellent. And without revealing our client's name, can you give us kind of an overview of the size, industry, location, culture of this specific company?
Sure. They're a manufacturer in the Midwest. They have about 350 employees. They have offices in Europe and in Asia. And their business vertical is on the manufacturing side of laser or dot pen inscribing tools. So all the manufacturers out there that need to have some product identification, their systems are the ones that embed those numbers on those applications or products. So Harley-Davidson is a client of theirs, and
Cool.
the serial number you see on their frame is using their technology.
Excellent. Very neat. Very interesting company, it sounds like, to work with. So how did Third Stage come in and help them kind of solve this problem of just overall technology optimization, it sounds like?
Sure. I think most clients that engage Third Stage probably have an idea of where the project's going to lead them. But we start from a more holistic, independent perspective in that we don't want to be geared or directed in our assessment. We want to look at it from a 30,000 down to a 300-foot level, where we look at technology, the obstacles around that, processes, but also the human aspect of the organization, and rather interesting findings when we performed our organizational readiness assessment that really highlighted the fact that simply changing technology was not the direction we needed to go.
Interesting. So what were the results of the project? You know, what did you end up recommending to them after you did all of these assessments and kind of got your hands dirty within the organization, got to know them really well?
Yeah, and they're probably very similar to a number of small to medium companies that want to be bigger, is that they have grown organically, but also through acquisitions and sister companies that become part of the main organization, is that they had systems of independence, so to speak. So the folks in Europe had their own system, the folks in Asia had their own systems, the United States. And really, the linchpin of our recommendation was, as I mentioned earlier, the ORA survey, is that there was a significant amount of obstacles and perceptions that any future change without fixing the foundation was going to be fraught with errors and problems. So our recommendation wasn't necessarily just go out and buy a new system and deploy it company-wide. Is to really look at the basic, or what I call blocking and tackling. So data was all over the place. There wasn't any kind of structure or management around that. We actually recommended that they dispose of certain systems and bring those organizations or their departments onto the main platform. So there's a lot of things that organizations would do prior to implementing and selecting and implementing an ERP system. And we actually advise them as our output of this project to do just that. Get the environment and the organization set up for success for maybe a future ERP selection implementation. So Getting systems integrated with each other, training people. That was also another big highlight of our organizational assessment survey, is that people just didn't believe they were well trained with the last implementation. So actually kind of going back a few steps and looking at this from what are the simple, quick wins that we can do in an organization that you would need to do anyway prior to a major ERP implementation. And I would say that the leadership was surprised by those findings, but really once we went through the justification for that, and that every item that we recommended were activities they would have to do anyway, we just wanted to put the pause on them spending any significant amount of money that would just introduce more errors and problems into their organization.
So it sounds like you recommended that they needed to get their organization aligned around whether it's business processes, whether it's their optimization of their own technology, training, integration, data management, those types of things. So when you do that type of recommendation, do you give the client steps to make sure that they are establishing that strong foundation?
Yeah, absolutely. Most of our projects, maybe not all, but most of our projects do include some form of roadmap that when we provide our recommendations, and I've been on the side of running operations myself, and I've never liked it when people gave advice, but didn't tell you how to implement that advice. So we do advise kind of stages of, let's say, what you can do immediately, what you can do within 1 to 3 months, what you can do in the next 12 months, and then maybe the next year. So organizations cannot stop doing their business. And so giving them a direction, a roadmap is so important, because without leadership and guidance around that, too many companies would probably start in the process of improving themselves in 3 or 4 months and then stop. So this gave them a little kind of cookie crumb kind of process that they could follow for literally the next 12 months and have great success because they're achievable objectives.
Excellent. So you kind of gave them a game plan, a playbook, if you will, to kind of lay out what the next steps are to achieve that optimization within their organization.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so can you just enlighten us to, third stage is a technology agnostic and independent consultancy. So what does that mean for a client that may engage you to say, hey, I think I need new ERP software, and then you come out on the other end being like, actually, the organization needs some restructuring and just some tightening up before we can do that. Do you care if they buy software or not?
Good question. We don't have a financial relationship with software vendors out there. We have relationships with the vendors because we have selected ERP systems and other point solutions. We've implemented them. So we know what I would think would be the best fit for organizations. And I think that agnostic perspective allows us to actually make a recommendation of don't buy more software. And I think that just gains more credibility for our reputation, but also our clients are realizing that when they do client reference calls, we are going to give you the truth, and we will give you a direction that doesn't necessarily have some kind of financial impact to us. And so if our recommendation is buy software, buy this software, or don't buy software at all, I think that gives us that agnostic perspective that I think most consulting firms don't have.
Very interesting. Well said. Thank you for taking us through that process. So with this specific client, what were some key challenges that you ran into when working on their specific scope of work?
Yeah, I think, and this is kind of in line with kind of what I think most companies have experienced over the last couple of years with the COVID pandemic, is that their sales took a significant hit. And so the pressure to improve the performance of the organization was pretty relevant and matter of fact in all the workshops that we had, that the organization was kind of stressing potentially too much of what they can do with their current system to trying to get back those sales. So, and I don't want to be a seller of the ORA survey too much, but that was really enlightening because we heard grumblings, we heard perspectives from the workforce in our workshops and some of our one-on-one interviews, but it was really the survey that highlighted some significant obstacles for any significant change going forward. So one of the things that we tried to adopt is allowing the folks in the workforce who will be part of any implementation to be part of the solution. So we identified easy wins, hard wins throughout the evaluation, and really educating our sponsor about what we're finding, but still keeping even our agnostic view of who's saying what at arm's reach, so that people could have a voice in the decision making. So almost going to what we do in a RFP ERP selection is that we allow the decision making to be a collective perspective for all parties. So this isn't our recommendations, it's what we heard from the team based with our experience becomes the recommendations out of a project like this.
Excellent. And when you are going through this kind of cultural survey, if you will, or the readiness assessment, when you conduct them, it seems like kind of a vulnerable or sensitive process that can make employees sometimes uncomfortable and hold them back from being completely honest. How do you make sure that there is autonomy within that process?
Yeah, we walk through how this process works. So outside of some maybe identification questions like what department do you work in, how long have you been with the company, that's the closest personal information we collect. Our tool does not collect email addresses, even IP addresses to some extent. So it is really agnostic. I don't know who fills out anything. And quite honestly, probably the folks that have the most uneasiness is actually some of the leadership that we work with, because we ask the workforce how leadership performs. Do they give you encouragement and workable goals? Do they support change? Do they allow further training for system implementation? So we actually kind of put all the leadership on the questionnaire from a perspective of how does the workforce view them before we make any kind of recommendation for a significant change in the organization. So it's probably less of the individuals who fill out the surveys and more about, does the leadership really want to know the answers to these questions?
Right. That's a really interesting perspective. So do you feel like they did want to know the answer to the questions?
Quite honestly, and I think basing all the findings that we collect in a project like this, the survey, workshops, one-on-one interviews, looking at company documentation that they provide us, when we embed them all together and link them, I think the findings help support our recommendations. So going back to your question about, how is third stage agnostic and how do we view software purchases? Well, for us to recommend changes that really won't be successful based upon our findings would be very short-sighted on our part. Obviously, we want to be part of any future project with our clients, but quite honestly, we need to be realistic in our expectations in our recommendations. So for them to go off and go do this magical project that will solve all their problems, even though we know that won't be true based upon our findings, that's not good for our long-term longevity either. So I think the leadership want to know reality so that they know what they're getting into. Again, having been on that side of the fence, I never wanted to have a consulting firm or software integration firm sell me a bag of goods that they potentially are going to know that it's not fruitful for us to pursue.
Right. And that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's a pretty typical exercise that a lot of leadership teams go through within this process. It's just kind of an overall awareness of where their business is at. And technology, as we know, is never a solution. It should be, an optimization tool for an already strong and healthy, thriving culture. So what were some key milestones that you and your team achieved during this project?
Milestone in the sense of phases that we did or some of the deliverables that we produced?
I would say milestones could be however you interpret it, not to, answer a question with a question, but what were some of the key points that you feel like you were actually making an impact on the business?
So great question. And I think going back to, how do employees feel about a project like this? more than anything, we stress that we're not out there looking to see what they're doing in their job. So could the organization do without their services? This is about most organizations wanting to grow without necessarily hiring a ton of folks. So when we level set with the folks that we talk to, they start understanding that we're here to help. But more importantly, we're probably asking questions that the leadership probably never had time to do as well. So as we go through workshops, the survey, we actually did a technology review of solutions out there just to see whether there would be a better fit, and providing that feedback, not again just to the leadership, but to the departments as well. So I think the engagement that we provide along the way, we kind of allow them to be, again, part of the solution making. So between the survey, the workshops, our analysis of other ERP solutions out there, really gain the traction from the folks there. So along the way, whether you call them milestones or stage gates along the process, we allowed them to kind of level set every time we kind of paused in the project. And so I think it allowed them to change direction if they wanted to, or ask greater clarification about some of our findings without just waiting to the end. So we have a very strict methodology in gaining leadership buy-in along the way. And so those milestones or phases of a project allow us to kind of stop, pause, understand what's going on before we get too far down the road. So that when we give our recommendations at the end, they're not surprised, they're not challenged with it, because we've kind of given them the education along the way.
Excellent. And do you know how this company is doing now? Now that
Yeah, I do actually. It's they're actually sales are increasing. They've made some of the changes that we recommended. Obviously, my phone is ready for any kind of call from the leadership to come help them, because again, it's very challenging for projects to take place of any significance while the operations is doing what they're doing day to day. And so we don't expect, and I never expect, that a client's going to go off and do their own project by themselves. I highly encourage it. Knowledge retention is great, so I encourage all organizations to try, but really they need to come help and allow us to assist them in that process. So they have made some of the blocking and tackling, so to speak, changes, but it's just kind of, it's not a one and done kind of activity. Sure. This is an evolution for organizations. So I'm hoping that we'll get a repeat or at least an opportunity to come back and assist them along this journey. But they are, sales are up. They've made some changes. They've seen some results from that. It's just keeping the pace of what they need to grow.
Yeah, well, it sounds like those recommendations have made a positive impact as they continue to evolve within their overall strategies. So what did you specifically learn from this project, if anything?
That's as much as I think processes can dictate success, or technology can dictate success, or having clear objectives will drive success. It's really comes down to the people. As long as there are humans within our organizations, their attitudes, skill sets, training, workload, all that come into play of making anything successful. Too often you will see demonstrations of ERP systems that are fabulous, right? Newest technology, it's great. Yeah. But then we want everyone to do their job, plus implement a system, plus learn new systems, plus change, and they have work-life balance as well. We can never forget the individual in any of our decision-making, because they're going to be the success factor or not. And so I keep learning that the individual is a very strong component to making any of our projects successful. And I think this project didn't necessarily give me insight to that for the first time. It just keeps reiterating the strength that the individual has in success.
Sure, reinforcing that organizational change management and need for those types of initiatives and strategies, certainly.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for talking to me today, Scott. And if anyone has any questions for Scott about this specific project or anything in the manufacturing or digital transformation space, please feel free to reach out to him directly. His contact information is on the Contact Us section of our website.